So pastoral councils can be viewed differently, basically. There's different, there's different theories of the pastoral council too, right? So one theory of the pastoral council is basically it's like a collection of ministry heads. And the pastoral council is when they all get together and discuss how ministries are going. That's not really what pastoral counselors are supposed to be, that they are, you want basically people with the virtue of prudence, people who can discern, they know the gospel, the teaching of the church, they've lived it for a while, and they're able to reflect on what's happening in the parish, in the world, and get together and pray and have a communal discernment on what our priorities should be at the moment.
Initially, I will be honest with you, I'm very results oriented. And initially, Father took quite a bit of time with us praying and making sure that we were connected to the reasons why we came together as a council. Because how can you then understand what the needs of the parish are if you are not you don't know yourself that well spiritually? And to me, that was extremely important.
Right off the bat from our very first meeting, Father Anthony, he said he wants us to challenge him. Where I think for many of us as Catholics, I think, especially how at least I was raised in the faith, what our priests say, we're going to follow that direction. How could we question them? But Father Anthony, right from the very first meeting, said, I really want you guys to question if it's my ideas or if it might be just the thought process. He really asked us to be critical, but of course in a loving way.
So part of this has to do with my background as having been an attorney. So the way that truth is arrived at in the legal process is actually you have two competing sides that are arguing the opposite of each other, and then you have a finder of fact, the jury or the judge. The idea that from this conversation or even argument that truth can emerge. So even if they're saying something that I ultimately don't agree with, it forces me to think through things more deeply and just be aware of the different perspectives that are existing here in the parish. God really does speak through the members of the pastoral council.
I think why it works so beautifully at the beginning is that we did not, it was not a generic approach. So we didn't go from new pastor, discipleship making overnight. No, it took a good 4 or 5 years. When Father first came here, we went out and all over Rancho Peñasquitos and knocked on every house. We prayed with people on the street. They opened the door, they came out, they were saying goodbye to us, and then we asked, can we pray with you? We held hands. It took us 2 months to finish the entire boundary for Our Lady of Martin Carmel. We brought people a rosary, how to pray the rosary, and invited them to Mass. That was something that initially was the Pastoral Council, and we did that. That was the foundation. Then other initiatives came on board. So we keep building, never in a rush. That's what we discovered from our pastor. He's extremely deliberate, and he will never rush into things. He has a gift for knowing when things need to come about and build upon that one for the next.
So sometimes a question is presented to me that I bring to them and I say, I need your advice on this, especially if it's something that's going to affect the whole parish and I'm not really clear about what the right direction is. So there's something that developed here called Save PQ Village. So PQ Village was a pretty large housing complex right down the hill from us that was for people with low incomes, and it was designed that way. And I got approached by a woman who, she didn't really come to Mass here very much, but she was kind of a community activist. And she wanted the church to get involved in all the community planning board meetings and ultimately in the city council. And so someone come into my office and, is like telling me, the parish, you guys need to show up at these meetings, you need to do stuff. And I honestly didn't know how we should get involved. And so I went to pastoral council and I said, well, what should we do about this? And they're like, yeah, we should get involved on behalf of advocating for the residents of PQ Village. And that started a 2-year involvement, which was one of the most beautiful experiences I've had as a priest, where a lot of parishioners became very passionate about it. A developer ended up making concessions along the way, so they had originally planned no affordable housing as part of this 600-something unit development. They ended up doing 10% affordable housing. But all the people who were still there were found apartments that were also rent subsidized apartments. So the developer went to the effort of doing that, relocating everybody. So we feel like our advocacy actually changed the outcome quite a bit. But the interesting thing is, at the end of the process, the person on the other side from the developer wrote a glowing letter thanking all of our volunteers, saying even though we were on opposite sides of this, it was great because afterwards we worked together to help move people. Like our volunteers actually went and loaded moving trucks. So the way that activated so many parishioners, I needed the consultation of the Pastoral Council to know what God was calling us to do.
He really wants to hear from us. We'll have, at times, topics that he'll want us to think about at least a month in advance of the meeting so that we could come in to the next Pastoral Council meeting really ready to share what's been on our hearts and on our minds. I think the importance, though, is to make sure that the priest, the pastor in particular, really stays grounded. And Father Anthony shared that right from the beginning, that's one of the key functions of the council, is to be someone of his eyes and ears out in the parish. Not only can we share what we're hearing from Father Anthony, but we're also then able to bring things back to Father Anthony as well.
I'll give you a perfect example. So we wanted to have our parish family become more engaged. And we had heard comments like, I don't know what I'm good at. I don't think I'm as good as that person or that person. So how do we then address that? Well, let's help them know what they're good at. So then we looked at different programs and we ended up with a gala program of Knowing Your Strength. I mean, it's a very popular program in the business world. And they actually have a Catholic section of that, which was then maybe tweaked a little and implemented for Our Lady of Mount Carmel. And I think we had over 400 people come through the program knowing what their talents were. And then we matched those talents with ministries that would be complementary. And that's what the recommendation was. Mm-hmm.
I don't think I had any idea just how many ministries that we have, well over 50, and it's growing, that we have across the parish, which is incredible. And so it's really interesting to see, like, through the life of the Pastoral Council and just to get exposed to more of the inner workings of the parish. It's an organization that is running 24/7. And it's neat. It's neat to see that. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, now I understand why I'm limiting myself so much from a spirituality perspective if all I ever think about is life at OLMC is just coming on Sunday.
What the Pastoral Council has done is when you step up, they're going to get us ready for that. By the initiatives we put in place is we need to be able to raise disciples. They're not going to raise themselves. So we are very clear what it takes to go from A through Z. Oh, Alpha and the Omega, I should say. Yeah. The Alpha, we know what we need to do. And then by the time we get over here, is that there have been hundreds of steps for someone, maybe 10 steps for someone else. It just depends. We meet you where you are. So in other words, we don't put you aside because you need 20 steps to get there. We prepare you and we feed you and we nourish you. And then we are able to walk with you through the 20 steps. You only have 5 steps. You go, all right, we have more time for the 20-stepper. And I believe when you build someone spiritually, you also help them set priorities spiritually. So if you're a full-time job and it's an extremely hard job, then maybe your only vocation at that point is to be a good worker, a good husband, a good father. But if those 3, you still have an hour, you can just come and work a special event, sell tickets or something. You know what I mean? Everybody can contribute something tangibly, but we don't criticize you if you don't have the time. But we're very grateful when you prioritize it and you give it 1 hour, if that's all you can give. That's okay.
I know I was raised that you're supposed to be busy and you're supposed to be working really hard and making a living for yourself and being able to support your family. And you're like, okay, there are elements of that are absolutely true, but at what cost is all of that busyness? And I think we can program so much into our day that we leave no time or very little time for trying to not just connect with God, but to really build on a relationship with Him. If you truly want to grow connected to Him, even if you don't know quite how to or where to get involved or where your particular strengths that you've been given, those God-given talents that you've received, that's a perfect opportunity if you're even thinking about that questioning of what could I offer? Especially in a parish our size, you can absolutely find a way. And a member of the pastoral council could just be that initial guide to help you connect into likely not just one ministry, but a couple.
The whole discussion in the church now, universal, of synodality, working pastoral councils are a big part, I think, of how that vision will be implemented. And what a lot of people don't realize, as the Church Universal is doing this, is there are many places in the church that don't have any pastoral councils at all. I'll tell you, there are some pastors that aren't very welcoming of the idea of pastoral councils and things like that. But I think that they're depriving themselves of a really important resource that will help in their work.
We are there to help them realize the mission of the church. We are the hands and feet of Jesus, and He is our shepherd. So we need to be able then to do what we can to meet that mission. Not everybody takes advantage of Good Life Retreat, discipleship, but you know what it is? The coming together to worship is contagious. So even to someone who hasn't been through different programs, or maybe doesn't volunteer as much, I couldn't tell them apart, because I believe that sense of belonging is contagious. If you have ideals, if you have goals, how can we help you meet them? If you want to be a missionary disciple, how can we help you with that? The Pastoral Council exists, not for Father Anthony, not for any other pastor, not for the bishop. It exists for you, for no other reason than to actually help you in your holiness seeking and to get you to heaven. I really believe that.